Welcome to Political Brew. I am your very temporary host, Mike Redding. I'm the news director here at News Center Maine. I'm joined, you recognize these folks, by former candidate for governor and Democratic strategist Betsy Sweet, and former Maine state senator and Republican strategist Garrett Mason. In this hour, we're going to talk about the presidential race.
Great.
Coming up in the second hour, we'll talk about local races here in Maine.
Great.
It appears, based on polls, that Harris is losing her momentum and that Donald Trump might be gaining it back. Is that how you see what's happening right now in the presidential race?
I've stopped looking at the polls because, if we look at the polls from the last couple of elections, they have been wrong every time. And so I think that they don't capture a lot of things. For example, we've spoken about 16,000 new people have registered to vote in Maine since the end of August. Those people are not answering polls. They're not picking up the phone. And I don't believe, Garrett and I may disagree with this, I don't think that's new Trump momentum. I think people who are for Trump are already there. I think that is new Harris momentum. So I just think that the poll thing is I don't pay as much attention to that, to what's actually happening to the candidates. And what we see is Kamala Harris going out to audiences that she hasn't been to, going on Fox News, going to speak to Hispanics, going to the men that she apparently are not coming her way. And on the side of Trump, we see a deteriorating candidate. Someone who sways to the music for 35 minutes, someone who cannot speak. I mean, honestly, that's what's happening. So I'm less worried about the polls and more worried about the candidates, quite honestly.
Well, we'll get back to that in a minute. But I do think that that's true. I think that the Harris campaign is losing momentum. I mean, you had the Fox News broadcast, which took her months to get on, and it did not go well for her. You have the 60 Minutes interview did not go well for her. Every time she's unscripted, it does not go well for her. But I think in regards to polls, I think polls are good in aggregate. I do tend to agree with Betsy that, polls are a snapshot in time. It's hard to aggregate them, especially people don't have home lines anymore. You have to do a togetherness with like text messaging and online stuff. So it is a science, and it's very hard to predict.
Right.
One thing I will watch for, though, and I am watching, is the betting markets. You watch the political betting markets, they tend to be more accurate than polling, especially in the last two cycles. You're seeing Donald Trump way ahead, and the reason that those are so effective, in my opinion, is because people are putting their money behind a candidate. And I think you're seeing Donald Trump pull ahead in these last couple of weeks, and I think that's going to continue to grow.
All right, if the race is within the margin of error of polls right now, which it is, what's going to change that between now and November 5th?
Well, I think this is where the rubber hits the road, which is Democrats traditionally and this year have always had a much better ground game than Republicans in terms of voter turnout, in terms of how we get to folks, in terms of making sure that we turn people out, whether it's for local races or for state races or for national races. That's where the ground game is. The Trump campaign and the RNC has not invested really in a strong ground game. So I think that's where the advantage is going to come. And I think it's going to be a larger win for Harris than we imagine. I don't think it's going to be as close as all the traditional predictors would predict, because this hasn't been a traditional race.
I agree. It's not going to be close, but Donald Trump's going to win with 312 electoral votes. So I think that we differ on that. But I think what's going to make the difference in these final days is there is a ground game, but I disagree. That has traditionally been true, that Democrats have had a better ground game. They've been better at absentee voting, but you look at what's going on now, especially in the states that really are going to decide this election. Republican mail-in voting is higher. It's coming up. You look at a state like Pennsylvania that was decided by 80,000 votes, and you have Republicans that have shifted that registration advantage and shifted the mail-in absentee voting numbers dramatically. So I think that might have been true in the past. I think the National Party has invested heavily to make that not so.
But in Pennsylvania, you also see 300 elected Republican officials coming out to endorse Harris. We look in Georgia, where we've had unprecedented first and second day early voting. I don't think those are all Trump people. Those are Harris people. So I think that you can look at it either way. But I believe that the question is whether you believe that big surge is coming from the Trump campaign or whether it's coming from the Harris campaign. And it's probably a little bit of both, but I think we differ on on where the momentum is.
One thing I'll say about 300 Republicans that endorsed Harris, I will take the trade of Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. for Dick and Liz Cheney. So it's just, I think that
Wow.
I don't think
That's kind of something.
I don't think that that's. I think what has happened here is there is a fundamental realignment of the parties. I think that has happened not only under Donald Trump, but I think it's also happened under Barack Obama. This has been a monumental shift. So to say that this Republican is endorsing Kamala Harris or this Democrat is endorsing Donald Trump, I think we're in a time of momentous change, and I'm not sure that means as much as it used to.
Okay, let's talk real quick about the Fox interview that Harris went on. If you read comments by people who sit on the Republican side of the aisle, she got butchered. If you read people that are on the Democrat side of the aisle, she crushed him, right? She crushed Brett Baer. What's the truth? What really happened, and honestly, what happened in that interview?
I think two things happened. One is Brett came out, he wasn't interviewing her, he was debating her because Trump wouldn't. He was debating her. Those questions were not questions, they were debates. He had an opinion and he was trying to get her to do it. So that's the first thing that happened. But the whole debate, the whole interview shifted when they played the edited clip of Trump talking about the enemy within. And when she said, stop, wait a minute, you and I know that that's not an accurate clip. When she did that, she took control. She said, I'm not going to be bullied by this man. And I'll tell you, every woman in America, and I think many men, said, oh my God, thank you for standing up to that guy who had been nagging her, bullying, and put his own hand in front of her as an interviewer through the whole thing. So I think that was a pivot moment where the whole energy of the thing changed, and I think people saw her take control and be in command and to say to this bullier, stop.
Garrett?
I see it completely different, but I guess that's why we're on this show together. But I think this is someone who, I will agree with one thing that she said. This isn't supposed to be a cakewalk.
Right.
This is a hard job. But the fact of the matter is, Kamala Harris has not done the hard work. She was replaced. She got given the job. She has never received a single vote for president. We are 19 days away from this election. She has not received a single vote for president in a primary or in a general election ever. She has walked through this process. It has been easy for her because she's been given the title time and time again. This is one of the first critical interviews that she has had as a nominee for president, and this is the first test. Usually these tests happen years in advance. She's never been tested. It came off bad. And it's not just that interview, but the 60 Minutes interview and everything else. She's been trying to sugarcoat this with friendly podcasts, and it's not going to work. The American people are seeing through it.
Well, and they're seeing through
Oh boy, hang on.
Well,
We're
we'll
running
see
out of time.
I know, but at least she's doing interviews. Trump is refusing to do any interview except with someone who likes him. That is
So let's
real.
leave it
That's
there.
true.
You guys are really
Welcome
good
to
at
Political
this.
Brew, Mike. Yeah.
You guys are really good at this. All right.
Having fun yet?
So we're going to end the discussion right there. In the next hour, we'll come back and we're going to talk about Maine politics. Thanks to Garrett and Betsy. I'm Mike Redding. Welcome to Political Brew. I'm Mike Redding. As I mentioned earlier, I am your very temporary host for this segment. This week, joined, of course, by Betsy and Garrett. Betsy has worked in the Democratic Party for how long, Betsy?
Oh, over 40 years.
Okay. Garrett, Republicans?
Been in political work for about 14 years.
Right, so been
Longer than he's been alive, I
been a
think.
Yes, that's probably true.
Been a state senator, has run for governor in Maine. They're joining me now. We're going to talk about Maine politics. Oh, let me flip this over. There are a lot of Republicans saying they think they might win the House back. What's your take on that? Do you think that they can win either parts of the
I'm forever
state
an optimist,
legislature?
so I remain hopeful. But there is a calculus at this time of year that trends with the political candidates and
Right.
that trends with whatever federal races are going on at the time. I think it's an uphill battle for Republicans to win the House.
Okay.
I do think that there is an opportunity to see an increased number of Republicans in the House. It's always been very split. It's been an interesting dynamic actually to watch over the years. When I was in office, the Senate was much more Republican friendly. It was easy for us to win over there. It does seem to be switching now. So I do think if the Republicans were going to take a body, it would be the House, but I think it's an uphill climb.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the Senate is pretty securely in Democratic hands this time around, and I think that the House will be closer. I also think that there's going to be tails from the federal election. I think a lot of new voters, a lot of people, those 16,000 new voters in Maine and stuff, often don't know as much about their local races, and they're prompted by the national race, and so most of them will just vote the ticket. So I think that bodes well, actually.
If we end up with a very close, evenly balanced sort of House, how does that change the politics of Maine?
Well, I think it's been, I think in regards to Janet Mills cementing her legacy, I think, in regards to the budget, there's a lot of things that happen. Like, I will say this, the State House in Augusta is not like Congress. Yeah. It's a very different place. And so you have independent-minded members of the legislature. So it's not always a solid block of Democrats or block of Republicans.
These are people that know each other.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And they know each other from where they went to school, where they work.
Yes.
They know each
other's
other.
families.
Yes.
Right.
And for those of us who have served, like Betsy has either in the lobby or I have an elected office and in the lobby, like you become very close to these people. So it's easier to influence them as throughout the legislative process. So if it gets closer, it's going to be harder to pass a budget. It's going to be harder, it's going to be a more dynamic, if you will, legislature.
Well, and I would hope that it would be more dynamic in that everyone realizes they have to get along better. They have to, they can't say, okay, we're just going to say no, or we're just going to say yes, or we're just, I think that closeness often breeds better legislation.
Right.
More difficult sometimes, more difficult for one party or the other to just sort of say, okay, we're going to just go and run with it, but I also think sometimes it's better legislation, and it's, the getting along actually becomes the high value, as opposed to being the stalwart, of one way or the other.
This plays into, the three of us watched the CD1 debate together Thursday night. And something struck me, which is there was a Republican running for office who said we have to compromise. We have to work together in Congress. I haven't heard that in a long time from either side.
Yeah.
What is it about Maine that does that to people?
Well, I think because we're a small town.
Yeah.
I think I mean, Garrett and I, we share a lot of history about, running for office, both of us as clean elections and ranked choice voting candidates. I think we care about each other's kids. We care about, because we don't have offices and our legislators are not removed from us through 3 staff people or through offices or committee offices, we actually we get to know them, not just as legislators, not just as their position on policy, but as human beings. And I think that makes a difference. And it's really hard to be awful to someone who you're going to go have breakfast with the next morning.
That's absolutely true. I mean, and I think this is some interesting insight that Political Brew viewers might not get to see very often. They see Betsy and I fight, right?
Yeah.
But Betsy and I actually like each
nice
other,
way.
right? And but it is true, and there is something special about Maine politics, in that you're up all night with the legislators, with the lobby, with the bureaucrats, and the people who are making these laws, and you get to know each other really well. And Maine has done a tradition of breeding those people. Like Olympia Snow, Bill Cohen, Susan Collins, and all of these people have come out of Maine that have been proven consensus makers. I think that's really powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of Democrats in that same category.
I was leaving them for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ed Musty, George Mitchell, Joe Brennan, Janet Mills, right?
I can vouch for what they said. They do get along. They enjoy being around each other. I've been around them enough now. We're going to leave it there for now. Thanks to Garrett and Betsy for joining us. Really appreciate it. I am Mike Redding. This is the last time I'll ever do this.